Spoiler alert for the 5.7 Archon quest, A Space and Time for You, and also Skirk's story quest. Hey, it's me, Roosevelt. It's been a hot minute. I just got really busy. Traveling the world and training to achieve my lifelong dream of being a battle rapper. It hasn't been working out. But now I'm back because Dainslift's immense hater energy has lured me back for the 5.7 Archon quest. I've missed you, Dainsalt. Also, we have some space-time shenanigans, which is very exciting for me because as fans of the channel might know, I have talked a lot about time before, some might say to an unhealthy degree, but I'll have you know, my girl dinner of a tortilla had a multivitamin wrapped in it. I'm the paragon of health and stability. Anyway, so let's speedrun a recap. So, we're in Natlan helping with a patrol ahead of a bodybuilding competition. We find a hilichurl in a cave with a strange object. It turns out to be a key to the hibernation chamber of the traveler's spaceship? Sure, the twins are aliens, and apparently they traveled via spaceship. I have so many questions already. The first one being, are there beefy aliens in the bodybuilding competition? Priorities. The point here is that there should only be 2 keys, one for each of the siblings, so we assume that this is the sibling's key. Anyway, we coincidentally meet a sussy girl at the cave who can see invisible monsters, but we can see them if we hold her hand. She's searching for the savior who will save them from doomsday, and we learn that the savior is the traveler's twin. Meanwhile, the Abyss Order is just putzing around Natlan and getting super dunked on by random NPCs. Just a regular Tuesday night, I guess there's nothing weird going on here. So Dane finally shows up and he's saltier than ever. We go to Natlan, where the Abyss Order cannot seem to defend their stronghold. And we meet the Word Sword of Heaven's End. He turns out to be Dane's old corrupted teacher from the Order of the Knights, Hayden. He's like, oh yeah, by the way, the Luma Fate? Yeah, we kind of used that, to reweave the ley lines of Khaenri'ah and revive it. We're so back, baby! Our protagonists are like, whatever man, and Traveler and Paimon just leave. But Dane stays to have a D&M with Hayden, and Hayden asks Dane to reminisce about Khaenri'ah. Because apparently Dane, out of all Khaenri'ahns, has the best memory. Yeah, old man dementia Dane, as we like to call him. Anyway, Dane shares what he remembers, but then Hayden reveals they did all this just to get Dane's memories, because those are the final and most important ingredients to actually reviving Khaenri'ah. Meanwhile, Traveler and Paimon meet back up with Deirdre, the sussy girl. In a super not romantic moment, we hold hands and we see the doomsday she spoke of, the Cataclysm 500 years ago. You realize at this point that Deirdre is not only from Khaenri'ah, but she's in a different time and space that's intersecting our own. Deirdre is still searching for the savior though, and as you part, she asks for a memento. Something she can show the savior to prove you crossed paths. And you realize now that the mysterious key we found is the Traveler's key that you gave to her in this moment. So the key basically time traveled back 500 years. Also, Deirdre is the hilichurl from the cave. Defending herself with the hilichurl club earlier was a neat little foreshadowing they did. Neat. Anyway, you are given the option to give her the key or keep it. The kicker here is that it doesn't matter what you choose. Deirdre still gets the key. If you keep it, the sibling shows up and slaps it out of your hand or whatever. It's during this meeting with the sibling that the sibling realizes that their future actions had doomed the past, because the key diverted them from saving Khaenri'ah to finding their sibling and trying to escape Teyvat. The sibling goes on to say that they have successfully used the Luma Fate to create the Atlas of the New World. This is basically a leyline blueprint to reviving Khaenri'ah. They had met with the Lord of the Night to get some room to reweave the ley lines, and the Lord of the Night agreed to it since it was an innovative approach to saving a civilization while not affecting Natlan. Now they have the Atlas, they just need a space to actually rebuild Khaenri'ah. The sibling makes it clear their other goal, to face the heavenly principles as an equal. And speak of the devil, we get a glimpse of the same rift in the sky we see in the introductory cutscene. So it seems like those sleepyhead heavenly principles were actually awake and listening to this conversation. Or at least the Sustainer was. And thus, the ultimate plan of the Abyss Order and the sibling reveals itself and unfolds. Now, given some time shenanigans, it may be confusing about what is actually going on and the timeline, so let's cover that real quick. Here's the rough sequence of events. Sometime prior to the Cataclysm, the twins arrive in their beefy alien spaceship. The sibling wakes up first and goes to Khaenri'ah and calls it their second home. The Vinster king recognizes their potential power as an abyss sponge and promotes them to prince or princess. The sibling had lost their memories but would regain them over time. Meanwhile, Dahri is in her village when a sage comes along to share the prophecy of Doomsday, the Cataclysm, but also speaks of a savior, the sibling. So Dahri goes on a quest to find the savior. Dahri would then meet the Traveler, which is an encounter crossing space-time, and we see the Cataclysm begin. She is given the Traveler's key, which is shown to the sibling 500 years ago, and the sibling abandons saving Khaenri'ah to find their sibling. The twins try to escape but are stopped by the Sustainer of Heavenly Principles, and Khaenri'ah is ultimately destroyed. In the present, the sibling used Intivats as a base to create a realm based on Khaenri'ah. They superimposed it over Natlan space-time, and this allowed for the crossing of paths with Dahri. And the Abyss Order putzing around and meditating was to provide memories as raw materials. The sibling used the raw materials with the realm as a template to reweave the ley lines of Khaenri'ah to make the Atlas of the New World. I'll get to the Atlas later, but I first want to focus on this meeting across space-time. So, the key part here is the handoff of Traveler's Key to Dahri. The sibling says that Istaroth allowed for this meeting so that Dahri would get the key, and the sibling would abandon Khaenri'ah for the Traveler. This basically set in motion all the events that have happened. This exchange between past and present is very similar to how Istaroth helped Makoto and A when A planted the sacred Sakura tree seed 500 years in the past. But this also brings up some questions about Istaroth's alignment. I mean, she did help out in Inazuma, and she was the only Shade who didn't abandon Enkanomiya. But here, she allows for Khaenri'ah to be destroyed and the 7 nations of Teyvat to suffer during the Cataclysm. Although I think there are some pretty simple explanations for this, like perhaps the abyssal threat in Khaenri'ah was just too dire. Or, perhaps out of the two options, awakening a dissenter was going to yield the better ultimate outcome. You know, Traveler going on their journey. So I really want to get into the topic of time, but first I want to discuss the keys a little bit, and this can be a nice little segue. For a period of time, there were 3 keys, not just 2. So the Traveler starts with just their own key and discovers a mysterious identical one, but the Traveler's key crosses space-time to get into Dahri's hands. Then, within 500 years' time, Traveler's Key became the mystery key dropped by Haley Churl Dahri. This initially had me all tripped up because it does open up a can of worms about time travel paradoxes. The keys are identical, so if Traveler had handed off the mysterious key instead, then the mysterious key would have basically spawned into existence for 500 years and then disappeared. You can consider it a variation of the bootstrap paradox of time travel, where items brought from the future have no clear origin aside from being brought from the future. For example, if your future self visited you now to give you the blueprint for a time machine. Yeah, so I bring this up for 2 reasons. One, just to clarify what is actually going on, but also to introduce this question of how changeable is the past. And this brings us to the nature of time. Early on in the Natlan Archon quest, Mavuika says that time is usually viewed as linear, with the past behind us and the unknown future ahead of us. Bo Barano of Simulanka had said something similar even before we went to Natlan. He said, "Our consciousness cannot comprehend the dimension of time, so we just experience an endless continuum of moments as the pinion of now turns along the rack of ages." But Mavuika suggests a different theory about the shape of time. She says that the past, present, and future are all equally real and exist simultaneously. In this case, the shape of time is a block. What she's talking about here is the concept of a block universe, and its philosophical equivalent, eternalism. Think of it as the past, present, and future being frozen in a block, one where you cannot distinguish the past from the future, because it's just a matter of perspective. Everything that has already happened cannot change, and everything that will happen has already happened. If you're not confused enough already, I did a deep dive into this in my video for the in-game book Time Trekker. To very succinctly summarize, the main character time travels to solve riddles, but at the end realizes his future self had time traveled to set up the riddles for his past self. Basically, all of his time travel was already integrated into the past. This is what is called a self-consistent timeline. In this type of timeline, you can't actually change anything because everything, including the time travel itself, has already happened. Giving the key to Diridith is an example of a self-consistent timeline. This act did not change the past, but rather the actions were already integrated into our current timeline. With the important caveat, though, that we do not know if Diridith could have been prevented from obtaining the key. Side note, the movies Interstellar and Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban have great examples of this. In fact, Interstellar has a great representation of the past, present, and future existing simultaneously. Like when Matthew McConaughey gets sucked into the black hole, he witnesses all these moments in time at the same time. They are all equally real. Okay, all right, let's get back on track. But here's the other thing that's really important about all of this. We've been talking about the past, but what about the future? If the past and future are equally as real as now, this would imply both are unchangeable, and that the future has already happened. As Nicole said in the Fontaine Archon quest, a prophecy is just the history of the future. And, of course, fate is kind of a big thing in the story, and as Nicole had also said, fate is near impossible to change. Of course, at the same time, this breaks down a little bit because she's been giving us hints about how to subvert fate. And the Fontaine prophecy did play out, but not in the way that we really expected. This is all to say that the block universe does seem to fit with what's going on, mostly, but not entirely, because it does seem like the future isn't as set as someone like, say the Heavenly Principles might want us to believe. There is an alternative idea about time out there called the growing block universe theory. I mean, it's basically the block universe theory, except it only applies to the past and present. So the past and present exist, but the future does not yet exist. The future is still unknown and filled with a near infinite amount of possibilities. Anyway, I just wanted to present the idea. I'll kind of circle back to it later. But for now, there's something else that I wanted to talk about. This mechanic of a future action changing, or rather establishing the past, was long foreshadowed in a book we've had since the very first version. It's Vera's Melancholy, which is now getting a lot of screen time. And as your resident verified book expert, it is my duty to share this knowledge. Vera's Melancholy is a space opera/comedy. The story is about Vera, who lives in a small, boring village and dreams of grand adventures in her life. Then one day, a boy wizard pops out of her cabinets, fending off an eldritch slime monster. This boy, Ike, then takes Vera and her BFF Sachi on a bunch of space adventures with a princess who has lamprey mouths on her hands. Anyway, this book is bonkers. It's super popular in Mondstadt, and there's even a Tumblr AO3 ship war going down outside of the Cat's Tail. Sachi and Ike forever! Anyway, I actually made a video of Vera a long time ago with a summary and breakdown. If you want to go view that, it might be cringe though. Anyway, so in the Archon quest, Diridith talks about the false sky and dreams of exploring the universe beyond. Skirk also dreamed of traversing the starry seas. So both thematically call back to Vera's yearning to explore the universe because she's so bored. But the references to Vera's Melancholy are even more explicit now. Surtalogi the Foul became one of the 5 sinners and got super juiced up, and after that he traversed the universe, and that's how he found Skirk. In one of her character stories, he says, "How did that story go again? Distance is measured by the heart, and my heart is slightly larger than the universe. Once the whole universe becomes my front lawn," etc. This is a reference to Vera's Melancholy, specifically Volume 2, titled, "My backyard is slightly bigger than the entire universe." How far is beyond? Any place in this universe is just as boring as my backyard, Sachi said. The scale of everything beyond follows the heart, Ike replied. Thus, my heart is slightly bigger than the entire universe. But here's the thing. Surtalogi isn't the only one out here quoting Vera's Melancholy. Remember Dane's introduction? In English, it says, "The future must atone for bygone mistakes." But in Chinese, it more literally says, "The future saves the past." This exact phrase in Chinese is found in Vera's Melancholy. Towards the end of the story, Vera is cut and cursed by an abyssal sword, and her friends beg Ike to save her. They ask him if he can rewind time to prevent this from happening. "You don't understand," he says. "Only the future can save the past, not the other way around." Now, remember, Dane's introduction is said by a self-proclaimed prophet. In Chinese, it's more like one who understands fate. This is important because the one who understands fate is mentioned in the first Kari quest description. You know, where we encountered one of the sinners. And it simply just makes sense that the person talking about Dainsleif is, drumroll, his older brother, Vedrfolnir the Visionary. This is all to say that Surtalogi the Foul and Vedrfolnir the Visionary, two of the great sinners of Khaenri'ah, are both fans of a reverse space isekai book with teenage love triangles. Like, there's an entire volume where the girls are having a slumber party and the boys are discussing how to tell if a girl loves them or not. You know what? I have a new theory, and I'm probably the only one brave enough to say it. Surtalogi and Vedrfolnir are the ones behind the Tumblr AO3 ship war outside of Cat's Tail. Oh, dear creature. Sachi and Ike forever. No, really, I just find it so deeply funny that at least 2 of the 5 sinners of Khaenri'ah are quoting this stupid fucking book. Like, be fucking for real right now. Hello, I've returned. I kinda crashed out there. Sorry about that. I have regained my composure for more serious lore talk. Like, for real, for real. I think the part of Vera's Melancholy that Vedrfolnir quoted in his introduction for Dane is probably one of the most important quotes in the game. The future saves the past. Only the future can save the past, not the other way around. In the Archon quest, we see this highlighted and underscored. The Abyss Sibling says, "My actions 500 years in the future set everything in motion." However, instead of the future saving the past, the actions of the future guaranteed the ruin of Khaenri'ah. But there's now an atlas with the blueprint for a new Khaenri'ah, and the story is far from done. So, the sibling says that all that's left to reviving Khaenri'ah is to find a suitable host location for the Atlas of the New World. They then go on to say they want to speak to the Heavenly Principles as an equal. I think this means attaining Descender status, as she needs the might of a world behind her. After all, a Descender has the power to create, sustain, protect, and destroy a world. And New Khaenri'ah could be just that world. Interesting to wonder, though, if this will just be history repeating itself. Usurper 2.0. There's one thing I've been thinking about, and this is getting into a lot of speculation. If you choose to keep the key, which I did because me and all my homies hate fate, the sibling still forces you to give it to Deirdith. Or they actually gave her their own key. It doesn't matter. But they say that the twins both always want to change fate, but this time they can't let it happen. They have to reunite with Traveler 500 years in the past, no matter what. Now, this could simply be a matter of the sibling not wanting to change anything as their plan is going perfectly fine so far. However, I think it's very interesting it was at this point that they chose to show that the Sustainer of Heavenly Principles rift was in the background and disappeared once noticed by the sibling. So, the Sustainer was watching this meeting the entire time. And heavy speculation on my part, but I think it's interesting to think about if their decision to hand over the key was influenced by the fact that the gods were watching. I mean, I don't know. I feel like choosing to defy fate while the person who made fate is watching, might be kind of rude. Or dangerous. You know, like if someone bakes a cake and you don't like it, you still have to pretend you like it, right? Or something like that. Anyway, the point is, this reminded me about the gaze of the gods. And I think reviving Khaenri'ah may be a bit more complex than just finding a good spot to camp out. There's still the Heavenly Principles and this little thing called fate in the way. That said, in the Travails trailer, Dainsleif says, "In the perpetual meantime of a sheltered eternity, most are content to live and not to dream. But in the hidden corners where the god's gaze does not fall, there are those who dream of dreaming." I imagine now this may be commentary on the Atlas. But the hidden corners is a telling detail. As I already noted, back during the Fontaine Archon quest, Nicole said that a prophecy is just a history of the future, since the future is already written by fate. But she also says, just as prophecies are usually only the future as seen from the perspectives of the gods, could things be happening in hidden corners where the gods' gaze does not fall? To be clear, I don't think these hidden corners are literal locations that the gods can't see or something. Here, I think Nicole is introducing doubt about how unchangeable the future is and how flexible fate really is. As I mentioned earlier, perhaps the Heavenly Principles want Teyvat to be a block universe, but the reality is, it's really a growing block universe. Now, I know I mentioned it as a side note, but remember, in a growing block universe, the past and present exist simultaneously and they are equally real. They are the block. But the future does not exist and the future is unknown. And also remember what Diridith said when she asked about Khaenri'ah's fate. She told us not to tell her, because we can only fight for our future if our future is unknown. So at this point, I think you might be able to tell what I'm getting at. That fate and prophecies are a scam by the ultimate scammers, the Heavenly Principles. Although, to be fair, it seems like the present and past still operate on the block universe model. And I know a lot of this is probably intuitively obvious with the themes of Genshin, but there is another reference I want to mention because I feel like it's a really cool and clever one that I really love. A few minutes ago, I had mentioned the book Time Trekker before in the context of the block universe, but I don't think that's actually what it's about, and I think it's more in support of the idea that the future is limitless. There's a passage that talks about time being light trapped between two mirrors. Countless diverging, converging, and parallel lights form the illusion we call time. There is no past, there is no future because the future is the past, etc. However, the structure and wording of this entire passage explicitly mirrors one from a short story called The Garden of Forking Paths. In it, there is an infinite series of times, in a dizzily growing, ever-spreading network of diverging, converging, and parallel times. The main idea held within the Garden of Forking Paths is that every decision creates new paths, and those paths create new opportunities. So, the future is unknown, and the web of time embraces every possibility. Okay, so honestly, I don't have any solid theory or speculation with this. I'm just mostly talking out loud to my microphone for friendship. I'm so lonely, but I feel like the pieces are coming together. On a final note, let's circle back to Vera's Melancholy. When Vera awakens at the end, Ike says, "The past cannot change the future, for the predetermined rules of equilibrium are slightly more powerful than me. But the future, with its infinite possibilities, could save the world." So, perhaps the infinite possibilities of the future, those outside of the purview of the gods, in the hidden corners where their gaze does not fall, will save the past and Khaenri'ah. I still have a lot more thoughts on this quest, and I'm still processing a lot of things. But in the meantime, let's just wrap this up. Oh hey, by the way, Kaeya was mentioned in the quest. You know, Kaeya Alberich, descendant of the Abyss Order's founder, the last hope of Khaenri'ah, my sweet and smart and handsome husband. Oh, did you think you could watch a Roosevelt video without me rambling on about a singular passing mention of Kaeya for like 20 minutes? Okay, so before Diridith's origins are revealed, Dainsleif speculates that Diridith is from a surviving full-blood clan, and their isolation from the rest of the world allowed the story of the savior to survive. Which doesn't make any sense because she isn't all like decayed or anything. But anyway, Paimon's like, "Oh, she's kind of like Kaeya then!" Didn't need to bring him up, but okay. Later, we find out Diridith is in another time and space, Khaenri'ah during the Cataclysm. Crack speculation, but I wonder if maybe this random Kaeya mention is a hint about his true origins. I'll be blunt because I've said way crazier things, I think. What if Kaeya is from a different time and space? Could he be from 500 years ago and plopped into the present? Or maybe he's from New Khaenri'ah? Yes, I am suggesting Kaeya is a time traveler from the future. Is this insane? Yes, but it's my brand. Hear me out though. I have noted many times before that Kaeya seems to foreshadow a lot of things, like by mentioning the Abyssal Dragon, Eight-Headed Hydra, and Silver-Haired Banshee, Dvalin, Osile, and Signora. Or in his hangout, all the world's a stage and its people merely players, which was the entire theme of Fontaine. I've talked about this elsewhere and I've had different ideas about how he could know these things, like an all-seeing eye or just being in cahoots with Vedrfolnir. But I guess you could know how things broadly play out if you're from the future too. But listen, here's the thing. If I explore every idea, one has to be right eventually, right? Thank you for watching. I really appreciate you guys. Please like, subscribe, share the video, and comment with your own theories down below. And also, have you checked your smoke detector battery recently? It's been so long since I last posted that it's probably dead. Please check on it. Okay, bye. Stuck in my mind, I can't get you